Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing the next in my Deity build series, Kelemvor. Kelemvor is a really interesting deity, essentially being like the god of the dead, and kind of being a sort of a neutral party who judges souls, and then allows them to safely pass on into the afterlife. Absolutely abhors undead, because obviously it affects the natural order of things, and as such, we have today, as his chosen, a Doomguide. Doomguides are very interesting parts of Kelemvor's kind of lore and his kind of faith. They are undead hunters, but that's actually kind of their like secondary thing. Their main thing is about traveling across the land, helping people basically die peacefully, and basically alleviating the fear of death in the populace. They also serve as couriers, traveling back and forth between, various, I guess, churches and places of worship for Kelemvor, and kind of spreading information and doing all this sort of thing. But their main thing is kind of just being these basically kind of just very gentle individuals who will help people pass on and, like, again, kind of be with them when they die. But at the same time, if there's undead bullshit happening, they will absolutely smite it down. As such, Doomguides tend to be clerics or paladins. They have a big thing about, using the turn undead ability. That's very important to them, as well as being able to use speak with dead as well, to be able to kind of discern what was going on and to be able to track down the source of, like, the necromancy. So overall, the Doomguides are very interesting and complex characters. If you just took a passing glance at the Forgotten Realms wiki, you'd think, okay, these guys are basically just the big brutes who smite undead with radiant damage and all that, but they're really not. They actually have a lot of interesting nuances kind of to their role within Kelemvor's faith, and I thought it would be really interesting, or myself and the community thought it would be really interesting to build around this idea. So, as with all of my deity builds, this was made over on my live stream. If you want to be a part of these builds in the future, please be sure to come and stop by. We have a lot of fun over there. But anyways, let's get into the build. I think quite obviously we are going to be starting as a Paladin. Paladin is going to give us a bunch of stuff that we want, obviously. Radiant damage stuff, martial weapon proficiency, heavy armor. It's going to do a lot for us, so we want to make sure we pick that up. We're going to get Divine Sense, which is going to give us an advantage on attack rolls against undead. Makes sense. Lay on Hands to be able to heal ourselves, and Channel Oath as well. So overall, basically, starting off as a Paladin is going to give us pretty much everything we want. Our subclass is extremely obvious. There was no other pick. Oath of Devotion. Oath of Devotion is basically the anti-undead subclass for Paladin, so we absolutely had to pick it up. It's going to give us Holy Rebuke, allowing us to grant an ally a vengeful aura that basically deals retaliating radiant damage to anyone who hits them with a melee attack. Probably not going to be using this one too often, if I will admit, but, it's there, makes sense. And as for the tenants, you basically just have to show courage, compassion, and duty. Basically, don't do evil shit, and you won't become an oath breaker. Next up for our stats, these ones are going to look a bit weird, but hear me out on this. Again, as many paladins are, they are quite multi-ability score dependent. You want strength or dexterity, you want constitution, you want charisma, and in this case, we kind of want a little bit of wisdom, but it's not 100% necessary. This build is going to kind of depend on which of the classes that we show off here you want to be more involved with, because one is wisdom based and one is charisma based, so you kind of have to choose what you want. I'm going for more levels in Paladin with this build, so I've decided to lean more into the charisma, but if you feel like the wisdom is more important for your version of this build, feel free to change it up as you go. There are plenty of items you can use to kind of spread your stats out as well, so I'll go over those as we go. But strength is at 16, it's going to be our main attacking stat, and the main stat I'm going to be probably increasing with this build. Constitution is at 14, again, as always, I would like this a little bit higher, but 14 is a pretty solid number for us. Intelligence is at 8, we don't need it. Dexterity is at 8, because yes, we are using the Gloves of Dexterity to bump this up. Again, with multi-ability score dependent builds, it's kind of a no-brainer. And there wasn't really any gloves I wanted to use with this build, really, like, like that much, so I decided, you know what, Gloves of Dexterity, patch that hole. Wisdom is at 12. Again, I would really like this higher, but unfortunately I couldn't really justify it with the way I'm building this character, but again, feel free to change this up if you decide to lean more into our other classes. And finally, Charisma at 16, because this is going to fuel things like our Aura and our Paladin spells, as well as our special Paladin abilities, so I wanted to pick this up. As for our skill proficiencies, you can kind of pick up whatever you like here, it really doesn't matter. I've gone for medicine, survival, and athletics because I've gone with the Outlander background again, as kind of someone who travels the world a lot, wandering, being a courier, and meeting different people. Outlander felt appropriate. Acolyte would obviously also work, but we are going to be getting religion proficiency in a different way later. So I decided to pick up medicine because I think that would make sense. I think not only just to be able to make alms to heal the sick, but also to make probably like kind of dark saying this, but like kind of euthanasia cocktails to allow people who are in pain to pass peacefully. Kind of a weird thing to say out loud when I say it, but hey, it's something a Doomguide would do. Next up, we also have Intimidation and Persuasion. These just kind of felt right for the character because at the end of the day, he's a big guy with a big weapon. He's gonna hit you pretty hard, so maybe don't piss him off. Next up at level 2, as always with these deity builds, we are going to take a quick dip over into Cleric to get our subclass and our deity, therefore getting our deity-related dialogue. My subclass of choice is going to be War Domain. Kelemvor's domains are Grave and Death, which unfortunately we don't have access to here, so hey, at least we can get one of the other 4 horsemen. So with War, we're going to get a few things, namely Divine Favour, which is nice, basically being able to bless ourselves to give ourselves a little bit of radiant damage, and having radiant damage on their weapons is a huge part of being a Doomguide. They make their weapons glow, they infuse it with as much radiant damage as possible, that be through Divine Smite, Divine Favour, other radiant buffs, and then go to town on the undead, so getting Divine Favour makes perfect sense here. As well as War Priest, we get 3 War Priest charges per long rest, and for each of those charges we can spend them to make an attack as a bonus action, basically giving us a lot more attacks, and you'll be surprised how many attacks we can get off with this build when we get into some other subclass features that I'll be showing off later. Of course, our deity is Kelemvor. Fair but distant Kelemvor guides the dead to their appropriate plane in the afterlife. His clergy provides last rites across Faerun, but also destroy undead that have escaped Kelemvor's judgment. Basically, the Reaper, which I think is brilliant. I absolutely love Kelemvor from a thematic standpoint. As for our cantrips, I'm going with the standard Cleric base kit. We want Resistance, Guidance, and Thaumaturgy. Makes perfect sense. And finally, for our spells, we are going to get Sanctuary in a different way later, so I'm actually not going to recommend that one. I'm going to recommend you actually take both of the healing spells here, because I feel like being able to heal both ourselves and our allies would make sense for a Kelemvorite, so we're going to pick those up. Kelemvorite. I wonder if that's actually the right way of saying that. Now I actually am, in an odd twist, going to take this build to Cleric level 2. What that's going to give us by the end of this build is access to level 4 spell slots with all our multi-classing kind of adding up to it, meaning we do get at least 1 max damage smite. We're also going to get in our Channel Divinity, which is going to allow us to turn undead. So we're going to have 2 ways of turning undead by the end of this build. Unfortunately, because our wisdom is so low, we're not really going to be able to get a lot of use out of this, but with large groups of undead, like the ones that will be showed off in the combat footage, you'll find that it still does get going quite well, because a lot of undead don't have good wisdom saves anyway. It's kind of the point of it being a wisdom save, so it will still work a bit, but like I say, play around with the stats, play around with the equipment, find what works for you. But we're also going to get Guiding Strike, allowing us to use our Channel Divinity to gain a plus 10 bonus to an attack roll when it is necessary. Again, this kind of just is like a weird leveling scheme where I didn't really need some of the higher levels of my other classes, so I thought if I throw another level of Cleric in here, it's going to give us a few things, like an extra spell as well, and I'm going to pick up Bless, because I feel like that makes sense for us. Again, with all of my builds, feel free to take these levels in any order you like, it really doesn't matter. I just always like to recommend that 1 level dip of Cleric right at the start to make sure you get the dialogue options, and War Cleric is good as a level 1 dip anyway, thanks to War Priest. But let's pop back over to Paladin. Paladin level 2 gives us all the good stuff, Divine Smite. Basically allowing us to give us that radiant damage boost that we oh so love about Paladin, as well as a fighting style, and of course, because I'm using a 2-handed weapon here, a glaive, we're going with great weapon fighting to reroll 1s and 2s on damage die. The reason I've gone for a glaive with this build is because there was a there is a glaive in the game that has innate extra radiant damage and glows with light, so perfect for Kelemvor, as well as I feel like using a glaive makes a ton of sense for this build. Number one, mechanically, there's a certain subclass feature that I'm going to be getting later that really benefits from the extra range a glaive provides, as well as thematically, I think it makes sense if you're dealing with zombies and undead quite a lot. It makes sense to have a long-ranged weapon to keep them at a distance. If we're playing by Walking Dead rules, and if they bite you, you can be infected and become a zombie yourself, which obviously we're not playing by those rules here, but I like to pretend that we are. I feel like it makes a lot of sense to have a long-ranged weapon, and so it just worked out perfectly for this build to pick up the weapon I'll be showing off later. As for our spells, we do get up to 5 of them, so I'm going to be picking up the standard kit. We already have Divine Favour, so we don't actually need it, but we're going to pick up Thunderous, Searing, and Wrathful Smite, as well as Heroism, because I feel like that would make sense. Making ourselves being immune to Frightened and gaining 5 temporary hit points each turn feels pretty nice, as well as Command, because I feel like it's a pretty decent spell to have on this build. Next up at Paladin level 3, we're going to get some good stuff that we really want from our subclass. Namely, we're going to get Divine Health, allowing us to preventing disease from affecting us, which, to be honest, makes a lot of sense. If that kind of gets rid of the whole zombie fight thing, then yeah, it would definitely make sense to have it on this build. We also get Sacred Weapon, allowing us to make our weapon emit a bright light and have a higher chance of hitting. Again, perfect for Kelemvor, as well as Turn the Unholy, turning nearby undead and fiends. They are forced to flee and cannot come close. This is basically kind of like a Diet Coke variation of Turn Undead, but it's perfect for this build and is the main reason I went for it for Devotion. It makes too much sense not to pick this up. We're also going to be getting Sanctuary and Protection from Evil and Good as well, just automatically added to our spell list for us, which is nice. Sanctuary obviously being one of the best spells in the game. We also do get we do also get an extra spell at this level, and I'll pick up Compelled Duel. Basically, you walk into a town that's being overrun by zombies, and you can immediately compel a zombie to focus on you instead of the innocent civilian that it's going for, and then take them down. Pretty good justification. Next up at Paladin level 4, we're going to get an extra Lay on Hands charge, some level 2 spell slots, and a feat. Unfortunately, this build is pretty ability score dependent. As much as I would love to grab things like Polearm Master and Great Weapon Master, I really can't, especially when I can't justify the use of things like Ethel's Boon or the Potion of Everlasting Vigor on this build, because the way you get those would absolutely not fly with a Kelemvorite. So I feel like I do need to bump up our strength here with a +2 to make it 18. Feel free to also bump up things like Charisma, Constitution, Wisdom, whatever you want to do. Again, you guys will probably be able to figure out a way to build this slightly better, but this is what I've come up with for now. At level 5, we're going to be finally getting extra, well, total level 7, but level 5 for Paladin, we're going to be getting extra attack, allowing us to attack twice, all that jazz. We're also going to get level 2 Oath spells, which means we're going to be grabbing Lesser Restoration and Silence. Lesser Restoration makes sense for a build like this from a thematic standpoint. Silence not so much, but hey, it's there. We're also going to get access to level 2 spells like I said, and we can pick up a couple here. Protection from Poison would allow us to basically gain poison resistance until our next long rest. Pretty fitting for a build like this. I'm sure poison is involved somewhere amongst all the necrotic damage, as well as Branding Smite, meaning we can prevent targets from turning invisible. Great stuff against the shadow creatures in Act 2, which again, a Kelemvorite would absolutely detest, so worth picking up. And then finally, at Paladin level 6, we're going to be picking up Aura of Protection, as well as level 3 spell slots now being unlocked, thanks to those Cleric levels. Aura of Protection is going to give us a bonus to our saving throws equal to our Charisma modifier. It says +0 in the tooltip here for some reason, but it is equal to our Charisma modifier, so it's going to be a bit higher. This is going to be helpful against those more powerful undead that can inflict Frightened, so we definitely want to pick this up. We also do get access to, we don't get access to level 3 spells yet because we messed with the spell slots. But doesn't matter. Right, we are going to be going into one final multi-class now. A lot of people like to go to Paladin 7 for the Aura, but Aura of Devotion is kind of meh. It just stops you and nearby allies from being charmed, which is not going to come up as much as you think, so I don't actually think it's worth it in this case. What I do want to go for is Ranger. Now, hear me out on this. Ranger is going to give us a ton of things that I think are really thematic for the build. Number one, that it fits into the whole world wanderer traveling to lots of different places, because that's kind of what Rangers do. It's also going to give us a bunch of unique abilities and something very, very specific to a build like this that we're going to be picking up later. that absolutely makes this build shine. So, at level 1 of Ranger, we're going to be getting our favourite enemy, and we're going to be picking up Sanctified Stalker. This is going to give us Religion Proficiency and Sacred Flame as a cantrip. Again, unfortunately, it does use our Wisdom, which kind of sucks, because again, our Wisdom sucks. So you're probably not going to be using this a lot, but hey, it makes sense to have. We also do get to pick up Natural Explorer, and I'm going to pick up Wasteland Wanderer Cold. We already have Poison Resistance thanks to protection from poison, and we actually have Fire Resistance thanks to a piece of equipment I'll be showing off later, and Cold Resistance makes the most sense, again, kind of staving off that death and undeath with like poison and cold resistance, and we are going to be getting necrotic resistance with this build, which is fun. So we get some extra proficiencies. Again, we're already picking up Religion thanks to our, you-know-what, the favoured enemy, but also we get to pick up another one, and the game has chosen Perception for us, and to be honest, I'm not going to argue. At Ranger level 2, we're going to get a couple of things, namely spells and spell slots, adding to our total, giving us another level 3 spell slot. And as for our spells, we do get to pick up a couple, and again, because our Wisdom isn't exactly hot, I'm going to say we're just going to pick up some utility options here, that being Enhanced Sleep and Longstrider. Longstrider, again, us being a heavy armor wearing kind of melee fighter, is actually going to be really useful. We also do get to pick up another fighting style, and I'm going to be picking up Archery because I do use a ranged weapon on this build. Finally, at level 3, we get to pick our subclass, and of course, I'm going to go with Hunter. Hunter is going to give us a unique feature called Hunter's Prey, and now normally I go for Colossus Killer for the flat extra damage each turn, but I actually want Hordebreaker. Hordebreaker is literally designed to deal with undead hordes of zombies. What it allows you to do is you can basically make a normal attack within your normal melee range. Again, helped out by the fact that we're using a weapon with reach, being a glaive. Now, basically what this does is when you attack an enemy, it has a little radius around it, and that you can do a follow-up attack completely free as long as an enemy is in that radius of the enemy you originally attacked. So essentially you're getting like a free extra attack against enemies that are close together. This works with both melee and ranged, so again, you can attack an enemy with our extended range to be able to kind of more easily get other enemies into that radius, so you can more consistently get off extra attacks. You'll see it in the combat footage that this happens quite a lot. And then also it can work with ranged as well, so you're able to, if there's a couple of enemies grouped up further away, you can still do this with your ranged weapon, which is great. Honestly, it fits so perfectly for this build thematically and mechanically, and it's actually a lot stronger than I initially gave it credit for. Again, the combat footage you'll see in a minute really shows how this can shine. We also do get another spell at this level, and again, nothing really for it here. Everything here basically requires a saving throw, so I'd say either take Speak with Animals or Goodberry, entirely up to you. Probably Speak with Animals for me. And finally, at level 4 of Ranger, we do get an extra feat, and it's entirely up to you what you want to do here. Bump your Wisdom, bump your Charisma to 18, but I'm personally going to be bumping my Strength to 20 to max out our damage output with our weapon, and namely our Divine Smite, because that is going to be our main source of damage. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a ton of power. You're going to get Divine Smite up to their maximum possible level. You're going to get Hordebreaker to be able to deal with multiple enemies at once. You're going to get a ton of different radiant damage buffs and ways to kind of combat undead effectively. And you're also going to be getting Turn Undead as well in multiple different forms to be able to really, control the battlefield when it comes to fighting undead. This build is designed to fight undead and will do its best when it can do that. Which makes it very strong kind of in the mid-game, as well as in some particularly strong late-game encounters, like the one that takes place in the room I'm currently in, as well as some late-game bosses as well. Now, don't get me wrong, this build will still perform extremely well. At the end of the day, you're still a pretty powerful Paladin, with some unique martial capabilities. This build will do well against any encounter, but when an undead encounter shows up, you're really gonna feel like you're fighting for Kelemvor's, praise or something, I don't friggin' know. Overall, this build is going to go pretty hard. It's very, very fun. But let's get into the equipment. I'll start off with the weapons first. I've decided to go with the Moonlight Glaive. You pick this up in Act 2 as part of the main questline. You literally cannot miss it unless you're evil, which with this build, I don't think you are. It's a +2 weapon that comes with an innate 1d4 radiant damage bonus. It glows with light, so we kind of get that Kelemvorite thing without having to use our actual abilities, and it comes with a unique attack called Moonlight Butterflies. Basically dealing an extra little bit of psychic damage, equal to our proficiency bonus, and they also take extra damage when they try to move away from it, and it gives us advantage on the target that we hit. This is kind of more of a Saluna thing, but this weapon was so perfect for this build that I absolutely just could not ignore it. But because we have things like Sacred Weapon and other ways of making our weapon glow with light and deal radiant damage with this build, you can use any weapon you like, it really doesn't matter. But the Moonlight Glaive is something I haven't really showed off on this channel, and I thought it was perfect for this build, so I decided to go with it. As for our ranged weapons, we can pick up Gandrel's Aspiration. I have to show it off on this build, even because of the abilities. You get it straight away in Act 1. It's a +1, what's it called? Heavy crossbow. It gains advantage on monstrosity-type enemies, but it also comes with a unique ability called Sacred Munitions. Infuse your crossbow bolts with holy energy. Your ranged weapon attacks can possibly inflict turn undead for the rest of the turn. Unfortunately, this is only used once per short rest, but it was so on theme for the build, I had to at least mention it. However, the way you get this is something that I don't feel like this character would do. Gandrel, one of the hunters you meet right at the start of the game outside of Anti-Ethels, who's looking for Astarion, an undead vampire, well, you have to kill him to get it. And while Astarion will do it in the cutscene if you let him, so you don't technically have to get your own hands dirty, I don't feel like it's something that this character would necessarily let happen. Again, you can kind of hand-wave it as a game mechanic if you like, but RP-wise, you're not going to get this weapon in a way that actually makes sense. But I've got an alternative. Unfortunately, this is only available in Act 3. Now, for some reason, this is called the Undead Slayer crossbow in my inventory. It's probably because of the mods that I use to add these weapons to my inventory. This might be an early access name, but this weapon is called the Long Arm of the Gur. It's obtained in Act 3, and essentially it's a +2 heavy crossbow, which, when used against undead creatures, it has a +1d4 bonus to attack and damage rolls. Again, very on theme for this build, maybe less so than, you know, actually being able to have turn undead on our ranged attacks, but overall it's a more powerful crossbow anyway, so I feel like you'll get more use out of this, so you'll probably want to switch to this by the time you reach Act 3 anyway, but I had to put mention Gandrel's Aspiration because it is so perfect here. Let's get on to the equipment. First up is the Grimskull Helm. Attacks cannot land critical hits against us. We gain resistance to fire damage and a usage of Hunter's Mark once per long rest. Now, unfortunately, the Hunter's Mark isn't going to be too great because we multi-classed into Ranger last, meaning that items with spells use our Wisdom, which is stupid. I don't know why that works. It should use your highest spellcasting modifier or the one from your starting class. It's just dumb, but that's the way it works. We're mainly here for the fact that it's heavy armor, which we can use, and the not having critical hits land against us is a big thing, and resistance to the most common damage type in the game from an Act 1 helmet cannot be ignored, so I wanted to use it for this build. However, if you want to get a bit more charisma in Act 3, you can swap over to the Birthright hat if you'd like, giving you a +2, making it a total of 18 with the stat spread we have here. So I could see that working. It's entirely up to you. We have the Mantle of the Holy Warrior, an Act 3 mantle, which is just here to give us a thematic ability, being Crusader's Mantle. Radiate holy power that emboldens nearby allies. Their weapon attacks deal an additional 1 to 4 radiant damage. So basically now the whole squad has got that Kelemvorite buff, which I think is really nice. Our main armor here is the Heavy Armor, the Plate Armor. It's obtained in Act 2, and this is a very special variant that you have to find. I have a link in the description for it, but this is a special variant that gives resistance to necrotic damage. No ifs, ands, or buffs, but perfect for us. So we have a nice rounded resistance of necrotic, fire, and ice, which is pretty common damage types, and just having resistance to necrotic is going to be seriously good for us. Gloves of Dexterity, as mentioned before, to set our Dexterity to 18 so that our initiative rolls aren't abysmal. We are wearing heavy armor, but this would give you the freedom to wear medium armor as well, if you so like. And again, maybe you'll find that, and I just didn't want to have our Dexterity sitting at an 8, but you may find you might want to use something else if you feel like you can spare the stats, maybe dumping Wisdom if you really don't care about that sort of thing. And finally, the Boots of Striding. Whenever we cast a spell that requires concentration, so Divine Favor, Crusader's Mantle, I guess any of our smite spells. Basically, we gain momentum, giving us a bit more movement speed, which again, great for a heavy armor melee build, as well as we cannot be knocked prone or moved against our will, meaning we maintain that concentration a lot easier. Again, our lower constitution means we might have a bit of trouble maintaining spells over a longer battle, but for the most part, we should be fine. Again, this build isn't concentration heavy, we're not relying on something like haste or the like. Get someone else in your party to kind of do that for you. As for our accessories, I've gone with the Amulet of Lost Voices to give us Speak with Dead once per long rest. This was kind of the only way I could get Speak with Dead, which again is a very important spell to the Doomguides, so this is where I'd pick it up. But if you don't really care about that side of things, well, I will quickly go over this, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on this below. There is a way to permanently get Speak with Dead on your character through the book for Necromancy of Fae. Now, obviously, I think a lot of Doomguides, as soon as they find the Necromancy of Fae, which is a literal book on dark necromancy, they would instantly destroy it, which you can do if you use Radiant Damage, which we have. However, apparently Doomguides, and this is an interesting thing, they actually go into deep study in necromancy. So in order to become a Doomguide proper, you have to study various different means of necromancy in as many different ways as possible to understand how it works, so you can effectively destroy undead. Now, maybe there's an interesting bit of nuance and a bit of character writing here. I would say that if you wanted to get that permanent Speak with Dead spell, you could flavour it as this character finding the Necromancy of Fae, but instead of destroying it, they decide, actually, I should read this and learn about this so I can be more effective against undead that use its power. And as such, maybe there's a little bit of corruption happening there. Maybe they start to get a bit corrupted by the sway of the book and the power it provides, or they're just like, yep, I know what that means now. I can also now Speak with Dead permanently, which is great for me. Close it, bing bang bosh, destroy the bloody thing. I mean, I think that could be a fun little thing to do in Act 1 if you're so inclined, but if not, we have this amulet here. But if you don't really care about using this amulet, I would recommend that once you're in Act 3, grabbing the Amulet of Greater Health, setting your Constitution to 23, allowing you to put those respec and put those stat points into something else, namely Wisdom. That way, then you can have a bit of better usage out of all of our Cleric and Ranger stuff, and it would be a much more balanced build overall, and again be much more tanky, so feel free to do that if you like. I didn't for the purposes of this video, but you can if you want. Next up, the Callous Glow Ring. The wearer deals an additional 2 points of damage against creatures that are illuminated. We have a glowing weapon, so that's pretty much going to be all the time for us. Now, this ring's description is slightly misleading. It's actually 2 points of radiant damage. For some reason, it doesn't specify radiant damage in the effect, but it is radiant damage. Mechanically, you'll see it in the combat logs and on the wiki, so you'll get extra radiant damage, which felt appropriate for this build. And finally, Till Death Do Us Part. This is an Act 3 ring that you get at the end of a quest line. This gives us Beacon of Hope, meaning that our allies will always regain the maximum amount of hit points possible when healed. They also gain advantage on Wisdom and Death saving throws, which again felt extremely appropriate for this build. And the quest that you get this from, I'm not going to say that any spoilers here, would be perfect for a Doomguide. So I'd suggest looking into it and trying to complete it. And that is the build. As you can see here, we get a ton out of it. Again, this build is the ultimate undead destroyer, as well as kind of leaning into that kind of almost nomadic aspect that the Doomguides go for. And just going over the lore and how it interacts with the mechanics and all that, this is one of my favourite builds I've done in a while. It felt so fun to work on. And in fact, again, it was one of those builds that me and the community really deliberated on, and we weren't sure how to build it. We even went for like a Cleric Bard mix at one point, and this was almost a duo build. This was almost a duos build with a Ranger Paladin and a Cleric Bard, but I ultimately decided against it. I think the Cleric Bard video is going to be its own separate thing eventually, and I wanted to see if I could get everything I wanted on this build in a single build, and I was able to do so in my opinion. Again, my only hang up is the stat spread. Again, if you want to finagle things and go for more of a wisdom than a charisma thing, it's entirely up to you. The build will still work either way. If you want to maybe again grab that Amulet of Greater Health to be able to move those stats around a bit more, or again you could do some kind of roleplay hand waving and get things like Ethel's Boon and the Potion of Everlasting Vigor to really optimize the build. Again, I'm trying to think about roleplay as well here, So this build has room for optimization if you don't care about the roleplay side of things too much, but since I do, and I'm quite happy with what I was able to come up with overall. You're going to still be doing all the fun Paladin stuff, you're going to get all that undead busting stuff, you're going to have a ton of fun. As for end of video stuff, I mean, this build will be going up literally later today, so there's not really much to talk about. I'm currently working on a very big project, probably my biggest video project I've done in a long time, probably since the Lethal Company video a few months back. It's basically requiring me to do a full playthrough of a fairly recent game, and I guess it is a challenge run. Yeah, it is a challenge run. I'm doing a challenge run of a video game that came out recently. People may be able to figure out what that is just from that description, but it's been really fun so far. I've been recording little clips of my adventures as I go, writing out a script about basically what happens and kind of my plan. It's kind of about build making as well, so it's kind of in the line of this channel because I'm having to make, I'm still in the process of doing it, a specific build in order to get enough power to be able to beat the game. And it's really, really interesting. It's definitely been a kind of different take on like kind of what this channel is about build making as such, and kind of actually going through the whole process of making a build throughout the game and seeing how it squares up in the form of like a challenge run style video. So hopefully I'm able to actually finish it. Again, with bigger projects like this, I tend to lose interest midway through and stop, but I think I can see this one going through. I think I can. I think I can make this one work, and I really, really hope you guys enjoy it when it does come out. I'm going to go in on the editing. Hopefully other stuff won't slow down in the meantime. I mean, I've got a lot of time off of work at the moment thanks to the Easter holidays, so I'm hoping I'll be able to kind of get this video kind of done over the next week, and then see if I can get that out for you guys hopefully soon. But I'm really, really looking forward to being able to show that off once it's done, if I get it done, because you know what I'm like. And then for other stuff, I mean, there's not really much else to talk about. Things are still just kind of coasting along as normal for me and the channel. Nothing really to discuss there. I mean, I will be doing, I believe, a live stream tomorrow, which I've just realized I've forgotten to announce or set up the thing for or anything like that, which is going to be another Deity build stream where we're going to make the next batch, because Kelemvor was the last one we had made. So I'm gonna see if we can get a couple of more deities done. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. I will thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.